Hi, this is Kerry. Today I'd like to do a video review of The Well-Worn Path by Raven Grimassi, Stephanie Taylor, and with art by Mickie Mueller. This team also did the Hidden Path deck, and actually reading the book for that, I realised that they were intended to be a set, and in fact they tried to sell them as a pair, sell it as a single deck, but the publishers weren't sure whether or not it would work out, so they decided to go for just the half, the first one, to see how it went and then make their decision. So I'll look at this one today, and then I'll have a look at the Hidden Path on another day and maybe do a comparison or talk about how the two work together. So inside the box it comes with a book, The Traveller's Guide to the Well-Worn Path, and this is a very good book. It's quite detailed. This is obviously, the authors try to give a taste of the main concepts that they see as being foundational in Wicca, and they do try to show different aspects. They talk about trying to honour the many different paths of Wicca, but obviously there's only so much that you can put into any single book or deck, and different traditions do different things and worship different gods. So they don't put the names of gods or goddesses on the cards to try and make them a little more generic, just calling them the crescent-crowned goddess and the stag-horned god. However, in the book they do talk at some points about Hecate, so you can kind of see where they're coming from. The book offers several divination spreads, which are quite nice. The Cauldron spread, the Pentagram spread, and also the Crossroads spread. Then for each card, I really like the way that, for one thing, you have a black and white scan of the card, but also they give a kind of divinatory meaning, so that if you're doing a reading you can just look at that. They also give a teaching, so explaining concepts from Wicca in quite an easy to grasp manner. And they also have what they call an alignment, which is basically a kind of guided visualization. And so there's one for each of the cards, and you can read them all together as a kind of flowing story or narrative, which I think works quite well. There's a bit of me that wishes that they had done a DVD or a CD reading out those alignments so that you could have that to listen to, but obviously that's not something that they did. You could always record them for yourself or just read it through and then try and do the meditation. But I have to say that generally when I've pathworked with these cards, I've done it in a non-guided form because I find it too difficult to either listen to my own voice or try to remember the exact phrasing that they have just from reading it through. So they go over in this book and with these cards what they consider the most basic concepts. And, oh yes, at the back there are also some suggestions on solitary rites that you can do using these cards instead of the actual objects. Now I think that our young self, as Starhawk would call it, our magical aspect, works better with things that go through all of our senses rather than just being visual. So I think that there's still a good case to be made for actually having tools, even if it is just a feather or a bit of incense, a candle, a glass with some water, and a stone. That still is more tactile, more interesting for our magical self than 4 pieces of card. But it's still quite useful to kind of see their description of how you could create a rite, and they give suggestions on creating your own rites using the cards. as well. They have a full moon rite, a dedication rite, and then they give an example of using a card, the Green Man, to create a rite, so that you can kind of think of how to do it for yourself with different cards. So all of that is quite useful information. As for the deck, it comes in a little black organza bag. And it starts with the Wheel of the Year. The artwork on these I find quite charming. It's fairly colourful. We get introduced to the three aspects of the goddess. And there's a lot of symbolism going on here with the raven, the crystal ball, the crone who's writing for her book of shadows, the herbs and the books, the wand. So then we have a number of cards which I found a little bit harder to manage, because they all basically just show pages from the Book of Shadows. However, I can see the point that they want to have the opportunity to remind us about particular concepts, and how do you express a concept like the reed in a visual form. Whether or not you agree with the reed, and it harm none, do as ye will, I think it is a useful concept to think about, to consider. If you then decide to reject it, that's fair enough. So this does very much sort of give a lot of the basics of Wicca. It could be seen as a kind of Wicca 101, but with the addition of cards so that you can meditate and pathwork with these concepts and ideas and use them in a divinatory way, which does work quite well. I also like the fact that with the Law of Three, they don't describe it as being, you know, what you put out there comes back to you threefold, but rather that it's about everything that we do in magic affects us at the level of body, mind and spirit. And I thought that was an interesting take on the Law of Three, though rather different to what I've heard elsewhere. So as I say, these ones I find a little bit tricky because they're all just a book with some writing on. But still, reading the book or knowing the concepts, you can certainly use them in a divinatory capacity. We then have Hearth and Home, Hand Fasting. So these are a lot of kind of concepts or tools, ideas, which they consider to be foundational to Wicca. The Moon card, the Crescent-Crowned Goddess. So you can give her whatever name you choose, and likewise with the Stag-Horned God. Then we have different cards for the altar and all the magical tools and items, so that you could use these instead of actual objects. And also in a divinatory capacity they add a different dimension. So it's looking in that sense at what they consider the foundational aspects of Wicca. The old ones, traditional ideas, and we do have a green man here as well, so two sort of nods to the god. Altogether, I find this quite an interesting and useful deck. It does show a lot of basic concepts, and so long as you appreciate that there may be different ways of thinking about these concepts, that it might not match your tradition precisely, then I think it can be a useful tool for divination, for meditation, for pathworking, and just as a reminder of Wiccan ideas. So that is the well-worn path. Blessed be.